Chapter 1376, Half a Great Old One. Inside the astral world, which was even more abstract than the spirit world, looking as though all the authorities and symbolism in the universe were included inside, every object appeared. And the light that illuminated this area wasn't spread uniformly. It was mainly concentrated in a few places, stacking together, forming spots created by a prism. There were a total of 3 spots in such a state, each sealing the various illusory kingdoms. One of the kingdoms was covered in bright flowers in perpetual daylight. Another seemed to be formed from books that were opened or closed. Different figures shuttled between them as they read as a form of entertainment. One was covered in storms as lightning and thunder continued without end in the boundless ocean. In the next second, the 3 different kingdoms underwent a violent change. In the area with perpetual daylight, all the flowers emitted light, as if they had become burning, miniature suns. The countless miniature suns intertwined together and surged deep into the kingdom before rising into an abnormally blinding golden sun. It emitted a scorching light that could illuminate the entire world, an entire solar system. However, no matter how much energy was released by this almost real sun, or how many flares of super high-temperature flames it created, it was unable to break through the prism-like spots of light. Every destroyed layer had a new layer produced at an equal speed. In another part of the astral world, on the surface of the mysterious country formed from all kinds of books, bits of brass points of light rapidly circulated on the spot of light, forming mysterious symbols that seemed to be searching for a critical point or effective method to destroy the barrier. During this process, the faint light formed a pair of illusory eyes that directly saw the weak spots and created eyes there. Meanwhile, inside the spot of light, there was also faint light swirling in it. It repeatedly took form, changing the critical points of the structure. This made it seem as though both sides were in a contest of their calculative abilities, with neither side clinching victory. In the boundless sea that was enveloped by lightning, wind, and rain, the spot of light suddenly lit up. It brought a portion of matter and approached the limit to speed, creating a violent wave that could destroy a planet. Such a wave, and the tiny bits of light constantly struck the prism-like spot of light, turning it into countless falling specks of light. At some point in time, the spot of light began to ripple like an illusory ocean that seemed to contain all colors. It seemed to solidify the surrounding environment, causing the light spots that carried the storm to slow down uncontrollably. Then, the points of light repeated a state of acceleration and deceleration. This kept repeating, but they refused to give up. With the chaos sea as a source, Adam used himself and the true creator as a pillar, envisioned 3 uniquenesses, and accommodated them into this system. Adam seemed to exceed the limitations of above the sequences and became half a great old one. He was able to forcefully suppress the eternal blazing sun, the lord of storms, and the god of knowledge and wisdom by himself, trapping the 3 sequence 0 true gods within their respective divine kingdoms. At that moment, he seemed to return to his peak condition, becoming that ancient sun god who slew one ancient god after another. He chose the 2 pathways of visionary and the hanged man as his foundation for his resurrection, because, apart from them having the trait of resurrecting, this was also the result of his research. This had the highest chance of becoming God Almighty. After using either one of the 2 pathways of visionary and the hanged man to become a true god and gaining initial control over the chaos sea, he could take back the remaining uniquenesses and sequence 1 beyonder characteristics. This was the easiest path to advance to the Lord of the astral world. And in this matter, there was something more special about visionary than the hanged man. When the visionary first gained control of the chaos sea and accommodated a second uniqueness and corresponding sequence 1 beyonder characteristic to a certain extent, he could envision the remaining fake symbolism and authority, allowing him to briefly obtain strength that transcended the sequences, giving him half a great old one's strength. However, at the end of the 3rd epoch, the ancient sun god's plan was, after being assassinated, he would immediately revive in the giant king's court where Sasrir was. He would first take back the hanged man's uniqueness and 3 sequence 1 beyonder characteristics and became a sequence 0 true god. Then, with the first blasphemy slate placed beside him, he would gain preliminary control over the Chaos Sea. With this foundation, he would allow Angel of Imagination Adam to awaken and return to his main body to form a support. After building such a system, the ancient sun god would make use of the hanged man's grazing ability and a visionary's virtual persona means to control the uniquenesses and sequence one beyonder characteristics of the sun, reader, and sailor pathways to allow himself to become infinitely close to a great old one and to maintain a minimum level of stability. He didn't directly accommodate the Chaos Sea and the other three pathways, uniqueness and sequence one beyonder characteristics, because he didn't want to advance to become a great old one, a pillar in that era. That would inevitably lead to the resurrection of God Almighty, causing him to lose himself. He planned on controlling the situation and materials. When the apocalypse approached, he would finish the last few steps and become a pillar with self-consciousness. And back then, he didn't plan on using visionary as a foundation because he hadn't obtained the quill of Ul-Zuhad. He lacked the main ingredient. When the kings of angels betrayed him and the plan failed miserably, he decided to take advantage of the disaster to take the best path when he was revived in Adam. At this moment, Adam, who had transformed into a giant shadow, stood on the water surface of the illusory, chaotic darkness, reflecting the astral world into his eyes, making it difficult for the three true gods to break through the restrictions. Surrounding him were beams of light that constantly fell from high above with blazing tails, illuminating the entire forsaken land of the gods, making both the northern and southern continents experience midday conditions simultaneously. In Baalam's remaining bell tower, Ammon, who was sitting on the railing, nudged the crystal monocle. With both hands propped up, he suddenly leaped up and entered the astral world. During this process, his left hand had an ancient mottled stone slab appear at some point in time. The first blasphemy slate. Ammon had once used it to seal the gap caused by Mr. Door's returning ritual, to prevent the invasion of the mother goddess of depravity. After the return ritual ended, and the door of flesh and blood completely collapsed without a tunnel to maintain anymore, he retrieved the blasphemy slate. At that moment, Ammon casually threw the ancient, mottled stone slate down from the astral world and allowed it to land somewhere in the fog sea. It was a mountain that tore out of the boundless black fog. There was no end to its depth. Its surroundings appeared like a continent. After the first blasphemy slate landed, it accurately stabbed into the peak of the mountain, forming an illusory sea that contained all the colors. At the same time, Ammon entered the astral world and saw the main peak of the Hornisus mountain range that had been grafted here. He saw the ancient and dilapidated palace on the mountain peak. Wearing a pointed hat and a classic black robe, his body rapidly expanded, instantly reaching the scale of a mountain. He opened his mouth, as though he was about to swallow Antigonus's magnificent but dilapidated palace. Suddenly, he saw a blurry figure. This figure was wearing a long, layered black dress that was not complicated, but had countless stars speckled on it. She was as big as the current Ammon. A pair of huge arms covered in dark black short hair grew out from both her torso and waist, but there was a beautiful and gentle face that was covered in thin black gauze. Her eyes seemed to compress the starry night sky. It made one feel at peace, but it also made one feel an uncontrollable fear. One of her two hands held a huge scythe, and another pair held a bird-shaped, golden accessory. The remaining pair held nothing, as though she was holding an invisible object. Evernight Goddess. In the next second, Ammon, who was wearing a monocle on his right eye, was quickly wiped away by an eraser like he was a sketch. The Evernight Goddess raised her two empty arms as she held up an almost invisible fog. On the surface of the fog, multiple doors of different shapes rapidly opened in different spots, but they were instantly blocked, preventing any loopholes from taking place. The Evernight Goddess floated above the peak of the Hornisus mountain range in the astral world, as she focused on controlling the fog world in her hand, preventing Ammon's true body from escaping. As more and more doors appeared, the opening of doors became faster and faster. This goddess was unable to deal with it alone. All she could do was raise her other two arms and raise the huge scythe. The dark black scythe rapidly turned into a corporeal coffin made of black fog. The almost invisible fog world was stuffed into the coffin, and all the movements instantly ceased. It was as though death had occurred. However, this silence only lasted for a second. On the surface of the black fog-formed coffin, a series of doors took form and opened again. As the Evernight goddess sealed the doors, she raised her arm that held a bird-shaped, golden accessory. The orange glow of twilight fell, adding a sense of decay and extinction to the heavy black coffin. The formation and opening of the doors slowed down as both parties entered a tug-of-war. At that moment, at the foot of the Evernight goddess, the main peak of the Hornisus mountain range collapsed. It was like the apocalypse had arrived early. At the same time, python-like black tentacles extended out from somewhere in the astral world. There was an eye at the end of each tentacle, either opened or closed. Any object that was seen by them would instantly turn into grayish-white rock, and anything touched by the tentacles distorted as limbs and heads stretched out, turning into good-looking women of all sizes. As the grayish-white spread rapidly, the tentacles surged towards the ancient and dilapidated palace, rushing towards Klein, who was about to accommodate the fool's uniqueness. Primordial demoness cheek.